Hello. Let's talk about one of the flirtiest, quickest, and most mentally stimulating transits we're about to experience. Venus enters Gemini on April 24th and will remain there until May 19th. And when that happens, love gets lighter, conversation gets more magnetic, and attraction starts with the mind. Venus rules love, relationships, beauty, pleasure, money, and what we value. Gemini rules communication, curiosity, ideas, wit, social exchange, and the way we connect through words. So when you put them together, this is a transit of playful chemistry, mental attraction, and fast-moving connection. This is charming. This is curious. This is unpredictable in the best way. Think, flirty conversations that turn into something more. Unexpected texts, messages, or social connections. A stronger desire for variety, freedom, and mental stimulation in love. More movement in your social life, your relationships, and your creative energy. This energy wants to talk. It wants to explore. It wants to keep things interesting. This transit is going to hit everyone a little differently, depending on what part of your life Gemini rules. So let's break it down sign by sign. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Aries Rising. Venus entering Gemini changes the pace. The atmosphere gets lighter, conversations start flowing again, and everyday life begins to feel more alive. This is not the kind of transit that arrives with heavy emotional drama or a huge crisis to work through. It works through movement, curiosity, timing, and connection. Small moments begin to matter more. A passing comment turns into something interesting. An ordinary interaction leads somewhere useful. Even the day itself can feel less stuck. Because Gemini rules the third house for Aries Rising, this transit lands in the part of life connected to communication, errands, writing, texting, learning, social media, short trips, local environments, siblings, neighbors, and the rhythm of daily exchanges. So, the shift may not look dramatic from the outside at first, but it changes a lot. The mind gets busier. The phone gets louder. Plans come together more quickly. People reach out. New ideas arrive. The social side of life starts opening up. That is where Venus does her work here. Instead of pushing things forward through effort alone, she creates momentum through charm, through the right phrasing, through being easy to engage with, through saying something at exactly the right moment and getting a better result than force ever could. That matters more than it seems. A lot of the time, Aries Rising moves straight toward what it wants. Fast decisions, strong instincts, clear reactions. That directness can be a gift, but Venus in Gemini offers something else. Range, options, adaptability, a softer hand on the steering wheel. During this transit, the smartest move is not always the boldest one. Sometimes the real opening comes through listening a little longer, responding a little differently, or letting the conversation develop before deciding what it means. Romantically, this can be a fun transit. Attraction is likely to build through wit, banter, curiosity, and mental chemistry. The spark comes from the exchange itself. A message turns flirtatious. A casual conversation keeps going. Someone becomes interesting because they are quick, clever, or impossible to forget once they start talking. The tone is lighter, but that does not mean it is shallow. Sometimes this kind of energy reveals compatibility faster than intensity does. For anyone dating, this can bring more activity through apps, online conversations, local events, short trips, mutual friends, or completely unplanned encounters that begin in a low-pressure way. There is something it started as nothing about this placement, and then suddenly there is a story. For established relationships, the benefit often shows up in a different way. This transit can restore a sense of freshness when things have become too practical, too repetitive, or too serious. Not by solving every issue in one perfect conversation, but by bringing the connection back into motion. Laughter returns. Messages become more thoughtful. The mental bond gets stronger. Curiosity replaces assumption. That alone can change the mood between two people. Sometimes closeness grows through depth. Sometimes it grows through ease. This is the second kind. Creative work and business matters can also get a boost here, especially in areas connected to communication. Writing, teaching, content creation, marketing, speaking, podcasting, sales, promotion, media, client outreach, and networking all tend to benefit from Venus moving through this part of the chart. Expression becomes smoother. The message lands better. The tone feels more attractive without trying too hard. That can make a real difference professionally. A well-timed email gets a response. A simple post reaches the right person. One introduction opens a door. A casual chat turns into an opportunity. This is not necessarily the season of giant, dramatic breakthroughs. It is the season of useful openings. Momentum builds through contact, conversation, and visibility. There is value in being seen, value in staying connected, and value in keeping ideas moving rather than sitting on them too long. The mental atmosphere shifts too. Since the third house also has a lot to do with perception, this transit can change the way daily life is experienced from the inside. Thoughts move faster. Curiosity returns. The need for stimulation increases. Boredom becomes harder to tolerate. That can be refreshing after a stagnant period, especially if everything has started feeling too heavy or too predictable. But there's a shadow side to that. Too many tabs open. Too many conversations at once. Too many interesting distractions. Too many half-formed ideas that never become anything solid. Venus in Gemini can scatter attention if there is no filter. A full schedule may look exciting while quietly draining energy. A charming person may keep things entertaining without bringing anything real. A burst of inspiration may feel important in the moment, only to vanish by the next day. That is the part to watch. Discernment matters here. Not every spark deserves investment. Not every message needs an immediate response. Not every invitation leads somewhere worth going. When that filter is in place, this transit becomes incredibly useful. It sharpens social instincts, improves communication, and makes life feel more responsive. Without that filter, it turns into noise. There is also something worth saying about confidence during this transit. The magnetism here is not coming from intensity. It is not about dominating the room, proving a point, or trying to make a huge impression. The appeal is lighter than that. It lives in humor, timing, flexibility, and the ability to make people feel engaged. In other words, the charm is in the delivery. That is why this transit can quietly work so well. Nothing has to be forced. Nothing has to be over-explained. The right words tend to travel farther than expected. So this period is excellent for reconnecting with people, improving the social atmosphere, refreshing a creative routine, taking short trips, learning something new, sharing ideas, speaking up, reaching out, and paying attention to what begins to move once the energy loosens. There is a real opening here for progress, but it comes through circulation, through exchange, through staying mentally present enough to notice what is unfolding in real time. That is the key. Venus in Gemini does not demand a dramatic reinvention. It simply invites a different way of moving through the world. Lighter on the surface, sharper underneath, and much more effective than it first appears. For Aries Rising, the best use of this transit is simple. Stay curious, stay selective, and let conversation do some of the work. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Taurus Rising. Venus entering Gemini shifts attention toward money, value, priorities, and the practical side of desire. This transit does not usually announce itself through chaos. The changes often begin in the mind first. A different attitude around spending, a sharper awareness of what feels worth it, a stronger instinct around standards, and less patience for anything that costs too much while giving too little back. Because Gemini rules the second house for Taurus Rising, Venus is moving through the part of life connected to income, possessions, self-worth, pricing, pleasure, security, and the things that create stability. That makes this period important, especially because Venus is also the chart ruler here. And this version of Venus is quicker. The pace picks up. Options multiply. Conversations around money begin. Ideas start circulating. Desire becomes more curious. Choices become less fixed. That is where the story begins. Instead of asking for one slow, stable answer, Venus in Gemini explores. It compares. It notices. It starts asking better questions. Is this still worth the time? Does this arrangement still make sense? Is that price too low? Is that expense really necessary? Those are useful questions. Taurus Rising usually prefers to build carefully. Once something feels solid, it is easy to keep reinforcing the structure and trusting what has already proven itself. Venus in Gemini does not reject that instinct, but it does loosen it. There can be more openness to adjusting the plan, testing a different strategy, or admitting that the old way is no longer giving the same return. Financially, this transit often brings movement. Not always in one dramatic wave, but through multiple openings. A conversation about rates, a new offer, a side project, a client lead, a sales idea, a better way of packaging a skill. Gemini works through exchange, so progress may come through words, networking, writing, media, teaching, selling, marketing, short-term projects, or simply catching an opportunity at the right moment. One message can help. One introduction can matter. One adjustment can change the numbers. One idea can become income. That is very possible here. At the same time, this placement is not only about what comes in. It also reveals what goes out. Venus moving through the second house can make pleasure purchases more tempting, and Gemini adds variety to the appetite. Suddenly there can be interest in 10 things at once. A small indulgence becomes several. Something gets bought for the thrill of it, then loses its shine almost immediately. That is one of the first places to stay awake. The issue is not enjoyment. The issue is leakage. Money has a way of showing where attention is scattered, where boredom is being fed, and where a temporary mood gets mistaken for a genuine need. So this is actually a good time to review spending without turning it into punishment. Look at subscriptions. Look at habits. Look at impulse purchases. Look at what feels rewarding and what just feels automatic. There is another layer to all of this, and it may matter even more than the financial part. The second house is also where self-worth lives. Not performance, not reputation, not image, something more basic than that. The standard that determines what gets accepted, what gets tolerated, and what no longer deserves access. Venus in Gemini can bring that into focus by making the mind more alert to inconsistencies. A flattering offer may still feel cheap. A charming person may still feel unreliable. Something that looks good on paper may start to feel flimsy once the details are examined more closely. In relationships, this transit can sharpen awareness around effort, reciprocity, generosity, and standards. Attraction may grow through conversation, intelligence, humor, and mental chemistry. But the deeper question underneath it is simpler. Does this actually add value? Does this feel consistent? Does this person know how to show up in a way that can be trusted? Or do they simply know how to keep things interesting? That distinction matters. For anyone dating, Venus in Gemini can bring more options, more talking, and more mentally stimulating connections. But because this is happening in the second house, the transit tends to reveal very quickly whether attraction has substance behind it. Charm counts. Consistency counts more. For established relationships, money and values may become a larger part of the conversation. How resources are shared. How effort is measured. What feels fair. What feels appreciated. Sometimes the most important realization here is not about love itself. It is about whether two people are actually living by compatible priorities. Work and business can benefit in real ways too. Venus in the second tends to support earning power, and Gemini helps through language, flexibility, and timing. This can be excellent for refining offers, improving pricing, making smarter asks, updating branding, promoting a talent more effectively, or finally putting better words around something that has been difficult to sell. The advantage is not force. The advantage is framing. Still, the shadow side needs to be respected. Too many options can weaken judgment. Too much mental stimulation can lead to scattered choices. Too much comparison can create restlessness where there was once peace. This transit does not always make life unstable, but it can make attention unstable if there is no center. And for Taurus Rising, that center is essential. So the real skill here is selectivity. Not every opportunity is profitable. Not every attractive thing is worth buying. Not every spark deserves investment. Not every offer reflects real value. The more clearly that is understood, the better this transit works. There is something attractive about this period too, and it comes from a stronger connection to taste and standards. Venus moving through the second can increase magnetism through simplicity, knowing what feels good, what looks right, and what no longer deserves compromise. Gemini adds brightness to that. So this period is excellent for reviewing finances, improving pricing, refining a business offer, building confidence, noticing where energy is being undervalued, and choosing quality over noise. There is a real opportunity here, but it does not come from grabbing everything. It comes from seeing clearly, seeing what pays, seeing what drains, seeing what deserves a longer-term investment and what only looks good in passing. That is the key. Venus in Gemini does not ask Taurus Rising to abandon stability. It asks for a smarter relationship with value, more flexible, more aware, and less willing to spend precious energy on what no longer makes sense. For Taurus Rising, the best use of this transit is simple. Know the worth, raise the standard, and let better choices reshape the rest. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Gemini Rising. Venus moving into Gemini is a noticeable shift for Gemini Rising because this lands right in the first house. So this is personal. It changes the way attention finds you, the way people respond, the way charm works, and even the way the body carries itself. There's usually more softness, more ease, more receptivity, and more desire to be seen, heard, and engaged with life again. The mood gets lighter. There is often more social flow, more curiosity, more movement, more interaction, more desire to get out of survival mode and back into the world. That matters because Venus in the first house tends to bring life back to the surface. It can restore confidence, but in a quiet way. Not through force, not through trying to dominate a room, more through presence, through tone, through humor, through becoming easier to approach and easier to remember. There is usually a visible side to this transit too, a stronger interest in style, a desire to refresh the look, more awareness of image, beauty, self-expression, and what feels attractive now versus what feels outdated. Sometimes that turns into a haircut, new clothes, better photos, or a different aesthetic altogether. Sometimes it is more subtle than that and simply shows up as carrying less tension, speaking with more ease, and feeling more comfortable being noticed. Either way, the signal changes, and Gemini adds variety to the whole thing. That means experimentation, a lighter tone, more playfulness, less attachment to one fixed image, and more openness to trying on different sides of yourself. This can be refreshing after heavier periods, especially if life has felt too repetitive, too serious, or too shut down. Romantically, this can be a very active transit. Venus in the first tends to increase attraction and visibility, which means people notice more. Responses can come faster. Social situations become smoother. There is often more flirting, more interest, and more little openings without needing to force anything. Gemini gives that a witty, quick, mentally stimulating flavor. So chemistry tends to build through conversation first, not through pressure, not through intensity, through spark, a good exchange, a fast reply, a joke that lands, a person who keeps the mind awake. This can make the dating atmosphere more fun, but it also comes with a caution. Not every connection deserves the same amount of energy. The first house increases visibility, and Gemini likes options. Put those together, and suddenly there may be more messages, more invitations, more conversations, and more people pulling for attention than usual. Some of that is exciting. Some of it is useful. Some of it is just distraction dressed up as chemistry. So discernment matters, because when Venus moves through the first house, one of the gifts is increased desirability. One of the risks is becoming too available to whatever feels good in the moment. Gemini loves interaction, but it does not always stop to ask where something is going. Otherwise, the energy gets scattered. The calendar fills up. The attention goes everywhere. And what started as fun turns into noise. There is another side to this transit that matters just as much, and that is identity. The first house is not only about appearance. It is also about how life is being met, what role feels natural now, and what version of the self is ready to come forward. Venus here can soften that whole process. Instead of forcing some huge reinvention, it allows for a more graceful shift, a different social tone, a different level of openness, a different relationship to being seen. That can be especially important here, where there is often more than one version of the self trying to speak at once, more than one direction, more than one possibility. Venus in Gemini does not necessarily simplify that, but it can make it easier to enjoy the process instead of treating it like a problem that has to be solved immediately. Not every identity shift needs a dramatic declaration. Sometimes it starts with confidence, sometimes with style, sometimes with the decision to stop shrinking. Work can benefit from this transit too, especially in any field where personality, communication, or visibility matter. Media, writing, branding, teaching, social media, sales, client work, content, performance, speaking, all of that can get a boost here. The first house puts more attention on you, and Gemini helps through delivery. The timing improves. The message lands better. The personality becomes part of the magnetism. That does not mean every opportunity automatically works out, but it does make this a stronger period for introducing something, promoting something, updating an image, re-entering a social or professional space, or letting yourself be more visible without overthinking every detail. Still, the shadow side of Venus in Gemini is inconsistency. Interest can shift quickly. Excitement can fade fast. Something can feel magnetic one day and irrelevant the next. That does not mean the transit is bad. It just means there has to be some kind of center. Not a rigid center. Just enough clarity to know what actually matters. Enough awareness to enjoy the attention without depending on it. Enough steadiness to recognize the difference between real connection and passing stimulation. Enough honesty to ask whether the charm is being used to connect or simply to keep everything light and moving. Because being liked is pleasant, but being known is different. Real attraction gets stronger when the self becomes more coherent, not less. Charm works best when it is connected to something genuine. And visibility becomes more useful when it reflects who you actually are, not just what gets the fastest response. On a practical level, this is a great time for refreshing the look, taking photos, dating, meeting people, reconnecting socially, updating personal branding, promoting work, and stepping back into visibility after a quieter stretch. And maybe the biggest gift here is simple: enjoyment returns. More pleasure in being seen, more pleasure in conversation, more pleasure in being out in the world, more pleasure in your own company again. That alone can change a lot. When Venus moves through the first house, life often starts responding differently because the signal being sent out has changed. There is more ease in it, more invitation, more softness. Gemini keeps that signal bright, quick, and interesting. So for Gemini Rising, this is not just a pleasant transit. It is a reminder that magnetism does not always come from effort. Sometimes it comes from lightness, from timing, from allowing personality to breathe again. The best use of this period is to enjoy the attention without chasing it, refresh the self without performing for everyone, and let connection grow from what feels alive rather than what simply feels available. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Cancer Rising. Venus entering Gemini takes the story inward for Cancer Rising. Instead of putting everything out in the open, it turns the focus toward what has been lingering beneath the surface. Feelings that were pushed aside, old attachments that never fully dissolved, exhaustion that has been disguised as patience, and desires that need privacy before they can make sense. Gemini rules the 12th house here, so this is not the most public part of life. It is the place of retreat, closure, dreams, recovery, hidden patterns, and the emotional residue that builds up when too much has been carried for too long. When Venus moves through this area, the pace usually changes. The appetite for noise drops. Constant contact can feel tiring. Time alone starts looking less like isolation and more like medicine. That shift is important. Cancer rising often absorbs far more than other people realize. Atmospheres get picked up immediately. Unspoken tension gets felt. Other people's needs can become so familiar that they start taking up more room than your own. A Venus transit through the 12th can expose exactly where that has gone too far. Not through drama, through awareness. A connection may no longer feel right. A certain dynamic may suddenly feel expensive. A person may stay on the mind, not because they belong in the future, but because something unfinished still wants to be understood. That is often how this works. First comes the realization, then later comes the decision. In love, the tone becomes more layered. Attraction can build through subtle signals, private conversations, emotional undertones, and moments that say a lot without being obvious. Sometimes there is a strong feeling of familiarity around someone. Sometimes a bond develops quietly and takes time to reveal what it actually is. Sometimes an old story returns, not to restart, but to show what still has a hold. There is beauty in that. There is also risk, because this part of the chart can blur boundaries. It can turn suggestion into meaning and possibility into attachment before anything concrete has really happened. Gemini adds mental activity, so the mind may want to analyze every pause, replay every conversation, and search for clues in places where direct answers would have been far more useful. So the real skill during this transit is staying grounded while still listening to what the heart is picking up. Not every strong feeling is a sign. Not every unresolved bond is meant to continue. Not every mysterious person is deep. Sometimes the confusion is the message. For those already involved with someone, the emotional climate may become more revealing than the actual words being said. A relationship can start showing its shape through what feels draining, what feels nourishing, what has gone unspoken, and what is no longer possible to keep pretending not to notice. In some cases, this brings tenderness, forgiveness, and a gentler kind of intimacy. In others, it reveals distance that has been quietly growing for a long time. Either way, something hidden gets harder to ignore. This is not always a season for making loud declarations. It is better for listening closely, noticing what the body does around certain people, and paying attention to the difference between comfort and depletion. The nervous system tells the truth quickly. Relief is information. Tension is information too. Outside of romance, this period can be deeply restorative when it is handled well. Less stimulation is likely to help. More sleep is likely to help. Stepping back from endless availability is likely to help. That might mean cutting down on social obligations, reducing digital noise, taking longer walks, writing things out, spending more time near water, getting off the phone earlier, or choosing company that does not require performance. What heals now is not intensity. It is spaciousness, and there may be a real hunger for that. After too much output, too much caretaking, or too much emotional traffic, Venus in Gemini can act like a reset for the inner world. It may become obvious where energy has been leaking away. It may become obvious where compassion has turned into overextension. It may become obvious that being understanding has not necessarily led to being understood. That is useful knowledge. Work life can take on a quieter rhythm too. This is rarely the loudest placement for promotion, but it can be excellent for preparation, incubation, research, drafting, editing, planning, and doing the kind of work that needs solitude in order to become strong. Good ideas may arrive sideways, in the shower, before sleep, during a walk, halfway through journaling, while doing something that looks unproductive from the outside. Those moments matter. Creative people often get something valuable from this transit because it helps language reach below the surface. The imagination sharpens. The dream life can get louder. Symbolism becomes easier to understand. A sentence may arrive out of nowhere and carry more truth than a week of overthinking. That is worth respecting. Financially, this is one of those periods where small leaks deserve attention. Not necessarily major loss, but the quiet kind. Subscriptions, convenience spending, emotional spending, habits that run in the background, the little comforts that start multiplying when the system is tired. A quick review goes a long way here. Not from guilt, just from honesty. At the same time, support can appear in understated ways. Someone may help privately. A favor may arrive without fanfare. A problem may get solved behind the scenes. Venus here does not always announce her gifts, but she can still bring them. Emotionally, one of the biggest themes is release. An old hurt may finally lose some of its charge. A fantasy may stop looking so convincing. A situation that once felt impossible to let go of may begin loosening on its own. That does not mean everything wraps up neatly. It means the grip changes, and sometimes that is the real beginning of healing. There is also something here about privacy becoming attractive again. Not secrecy, privacy. Keeping certain things protected while they are still forming. Not explaining everything. Not turning every feeling into a public update. Not inviting opinions into places that still need silence. For Cancer Rising, that can be powerful. Life does not always need a bigger audience. Sometimes it needs a safer container. So while Venus moves through Gemini, the best use of the transit is to reduce what scrambles the mind, stop feeding what drains the spirit, and give more value to what leaves you calmer, clearer, and more intact. Let the old story say what it came to say. Let the nervous system settle. Let unfinished feelings rise without letting them take over. Let rest count as progress. There is wisdom in slowing down enough to notice what is ending, what is healing, and what no longer deserves access to your inner world. That is where the sweetness lives this time around. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Leo Rising. When Venus moves into Gemini, life starts opening through people. For Leo Rising, this activates the 11th house, the part of the chart linked to friendships, networks, collaborations, community, audience, and long-range goals. So this is not only social, it is directional. The right conversation can change a plan. The right introduction can speed things up. What felt far away can start feeling more reachable once other people become part of the picture. That is where this transit helps. The mood usually gets brighter. Replies come faster. Plans come together more easily. There's a stronger pull toward group settings, shared interests, and spaces where ideas can move instead of sitting still. After a heavier stretch, that can feel like relief all by itself. And for Leo Rising, it matters in a specific way. There is often a natural tendency to lead from the heart, carry the vision personally, and make things happen through will. Venus in Gemini brings a different advantage. Not less strength, just more benefit from connection. Some things move because timing improves. Some doors open because the name lands in the right room. Some opportunities come from staying in circulation instead of trying to do everything alone. That makes this a useful period for reconnecting, showing up, and letting other people play a real role in what comes next. Socially, this can be one of the more enjoyable parts of the cycle. Friends may feel easier to reach. Invitations can increase. A group dynamic may warm up. Someone helpful may step forward. A casual exchange can turn into something useful. The 11th house often works like that. Its gifts build through mutual support, shared interests, and the kind of chemistry that grows when people are genuinely on the same wavelength. Gemini adds movement, humor, curiosity, and fast communication. So the benefit here is not only popularity, it is connection through exchange. Saying the right thing at the right time matters. Hearing about something early matters. Staying engaged matters. Professionally, this can be excellent for audience building, promotion, collaboration, social media, community-facing work, and anything that depends on reach. If the work benefits from visibility, this stretch can help it travel. A post may land better. A project may gain traction. A plan may finally start getting the response it needed. Not through force, through resonance. That is the difference. This house also has a lot to do with gains, not only financially, but through support, momentum, and future possibility. One of the biggest gifts here is access to people who understand where life is trying to go. That can look like allies, collaborators, helpful friends, or simply being around those who make the next chapter feel possible instead of exhausting. That matters more than it seems. A stale environment can shrink the vision. A lively one can wake it back up. Romantically, The tone is playful and social. Attraction may begin through friendship, conversation, shared communities, online interaction, or group settings where the pressure is low and the spark has room to build. That tends to work well here. The chemistry grows through enjoyment, banter, and the sense that someone is genuinely interesting to be around. So if love has felt too serious or too heavy, this placement can freshen the atmosphere. It brings back curiosity. It brings back movement. It brings back that feeling of actually liking the person, not just managing the relationship. For those already involved, this can help by putting friendship back in the center. Time together may feel better when there is more laughter, more shared plans, and more room to enjoy each other outside of duty. That alone can change a lot. For anyone dating, there may be more openings through mutual contacts, events, social media, or casual introductions that develop naturally. A person may stand out because they are witty, mentally quick, and easy to talk to. That kind of charm goes far under this transit. Still, something does need watching. Gemini likes variety, and the 11th house can get noisy fast. A full calendar is not the same thing as a nourishing one. Plenty of attention is not the same thing as genuine support. Being included everywhere does not automatically mean being valued where it counts. That is where discernment comes in. Some people open doors. Some people just keep you busy. Some connections feel energizing. Others take up space without adding much. This matters now, because it would be easy to scatter yourself by saying yes too quickly or giving too much access to people who have not earned it. The current is stronger during this transit, which is fun, but it also means choices matter. Not every invitation deserves a yes. Not every message needs full investment. Not every charming person belongs in the front row. Another important layer has to do with the future. The 11th house holds hopes, plans, and the wider vision of where life is trying to go. When Venus passes through here, the future often starts looking attractive again. A goal that went flat may regain life. A creative idea may find the right audience. Something worth building may finally feel possible once the environment starts feeding it instead of draining it. That shift can begin quietly. A conversation plants a seed. A friend reflects back a bigger version of your life. A project starts drawing the right response. A dream that had gone quiet begins speaking again. And once that happens, motivation returns in a very natural way. There is joy here too, and it should not be underestimated. Laughter with friends, plans that lift the mood, shared excitement, a reminder that life feels better when it is not carried alone. That kind of joy is not shallow. It is restorative. So while Venus moves through Gemini, let the social side of life become useful again. Return the message. Accept the invitation that feels right. Re-enter the room. Speak to the people who understand where you are trying to grow. Let collaboration replace unnecessary strain. Let community do some of the lifting. Just do not confuse visibility with belonging. The right room matters more than the biggest room. The right audience matters more than constant attention. The right people matter more than being everywhere at once. For Leo Rising, the sweet spot is simple. Stay connected, stay selective, and notice which relationships make the future feel brighter. That is where the gold is. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Virgo Rising. Venus entering Gemini puts the spotlight on career, reputation, visibility, and the path that is taking shape in public. For Virgo Rising, Gemini rules the 10th house, so this transit tends to show up where work, ambition, leadership, and long-term direction live. That means people notice more. Conversations with bosses, clients, or decision makers carry more weight. Timing matters. Presentation matters. The way your name moves through a room matters. That can be a real advantage. This is not only about doing the job well. It is also about how the work is being received. Venus in Gemini helps through tone, social intelligence, diplomacy, and sharper communication. A well-phrased email can help. A meeting can go better than expected. A casual introduction can open a serious door. Sometimes one smart conversation moves things faster than weeks of pushing. That is part of the gift here. Virgo Rising often focuses on substance first. Get it right, improve it, refine it, make it useful. That instinct is strong and it usually serves you. But this transit reminds you that skill alone is not the full story. Visibility has its own language. People respond to clarity. They respond to timing. They respond to someone who knows what they are offering and can speak about it without shrinking. So this can be a very good period for putting yourself forward, updating the brand, refreshing the resume, making the pitch, reaching out, asking for the meeting, speaking with more confidence about what you actually do. None of that is shallow. It is strategy. Work relationships may also become easier to manage now. If a dynamic has felt stiff, distant, or overly formal, this transit can soften it. There is more room for rapport, more ease in conversations, more flexibility around how things get handled. That does not mean every problem disappears, but it does mean the social side of work can improve enough to make progress possible. And if your career depends on words, ideas, teaching, marketing, writing, sales, media, consulting, content, or public communication, this transit can be especially useful. Gemini knows how to move information, and Venus helps it land well. The message can become more attractive. The delivery can become more natural. People may simply be more receptive to what you are saying. That matters. At the same time, this part of the chart is not only about career. It also speaks to image and public perception. How you are seen. What people associate with your name. The impression you leave behind after the conversation ends. Venus moving through the 10th can help polish that without making it feel forced. There may be a stronger instinct for what to say, how to say it, and which version of yourself belongs in professional spaces now. That can lead to a shift in direction too. A second option may appear. A different role may start looking better. A conversation may reveal a path you had not fully considered. Something that once felt fixed may suddenly become more flexible. That is where Gemini enters the story. It brings movement, options, and cross-currents. For some, that feels exciting. For others, a little messy. Virgo Rising usually likes a clean plan and a clear answer. This transit may not give the answer all at once, but it can give useful information quickly. And sometimes that is more valuable. Romantically, this placement can mix love with work, visibility, or admiration. Someone may stand out through intelligence, competence, status, or the way they carry responsibility. Attraction may build in professional spaces through mutual goals, or through a conversation that starts formally and keeps going because the chemistry is there. For those already involved, the question may be how work is affecting the relationship. Is ambition leaving enough room for connection? Is one person carrying too much? Are long-term goals actually aligned? This transit can bring those conversations forward in a lighter, more workable way, especially if the issue has been more about pace and communication than lack of love. There is a caution here too. Gemini can scatter focus when too many options arrive at once. At the top of the chart, that can look like overcommitting, saying yes too quickly, chasing visibility for its own sake, or getting pulled in several directions just because all of them sound promising. Not every opening is meant to become a priority. Not every flattering offer is a real step forward. That is why selection matters. Choose what supports the larger path. Choose what builds credibility. Choose what still makes sense after the excitement wears off. Another thing to watch is overthinking how you are coming across. Venus in the 10th can make you more aware of reputation, and Gemini can make that awareness louder than necessary. Too much checking, too much adjusting, too much trying to read every signal can become draining fast. Public image matters, yes, but not so much that it disconnects you from your own center. The strongest version of this transit is not about becoming more polished at the cost of becoming less real. It is about letting people see more of your intelligence, charm, and range in a way that supports where you are headed. So, while Venus moves through Gemini, take the meeting. Send the email. Update the message. Let yourself be visible. Talk to the people who matter. Be smart about timing. Stay open to new possibilities without letting every possibility take over the schedule. For Virgo Rising, this is a chance to make progress through connection, improve how your work is received, and bring more ease into the public side of life. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Libra Rising. Venus entering Gemini is a helpful transit for Libra Rising, and part of the reason is simple. The energy starts moving outward again. This does not land in a crowded, emotionally tangled part of the chart. It moves through the ninth house, which is where perspective expands, plans stretch farther, and life begins asking bigger questions. Travel, study, teaching, publishing, belief systems, legal matters, long-distance connections, and the search for meaning all live here. So when Venus passes through this territory, the atmosphere tends to get lighter, more open, and much more future-facing. That can feel like a breath of fresh air, especially after periods where everything has felt small, repetitive, or overly practical. For Libra Rising, this kind of transit can restore a sense of possibility. The mind wants movement. Curiosity comes back. Inspiration returns. New interests appear. A conversation may introduce a different way of seeing things. A trip might call your name. An opportunity connected to education, media, writing, teaching, or international themes could begin to develop. Even the emotional tone changes when the horizon looks wider. That is one of the real gifts here. Because the ninth house is not only about airplanes and passports. It is also about perspective, the worldview, the lens through which life is interpreted. Venus in Gemini can loosen rigid thinking, soften old conclusions, and make room for more flexibility. Something that felt stuck may not actually need force. It may need a different frame. And that is where progress can begin. A new idea lands. A different philosophy starts making more sense. A plan that once felt unrealistic suddenly seems possible. The future stops feeling so narrow. This can be a very good period for learning, studying, writing, speaking, creating content, teaching, publishing, promoting a message, or sharing something you know with a wider audience. Gemini brings language, variety, quick thinking, and exchange. Venus brings ease, attraction, flow, and likability. Together, they can make your voice more engaging and your ideas easier for other people to receive. That matters more than it sounds. Libra Rising is already ruled by Venus, so whenever Venus changes signs, the whole tone of life shifts with it. In Gemini, the ruler of the chart becomes more mentally active, more social, more interested in movement, more open to experimentation, and less willing to stay stuck in one stale pattern. So this transit may not only bring external opportunities, it can change what feels desirable in the first place. What once felt exciting may start feeling too limiting. What once seemed far away may start feeling worth pursuing. A new kind of freedom may become more attractive than comfort. That shift is important. Romantically, Venus in Gemini in the ninth can bring attraction through shared ideas, cultural differences, learning, travel, philosophy, spirituality, writing, or simply the feeling that someone opens up your mind. This is not a small, enclosed kind of chemistry. It wants room. It wants discovery. It wants a person who makes life feel larger, not heavier. So for Libra Rising, love may show up through travel, long-distance situations, online spaces, education, international connections, or conversations that immediately go beyond surface-level small talk. A person may stand out because they are bright, curious, informed, funny, and impossible to place into one category too quickly. That can be exciting. It can also be revealing, because the ninth house tends to show what you are growing toward, not only what feels familiar. Sometimes a transit here brings someone who reflects a part of yourself that wants more range, more space, more truth, or more honesty about where life is trying to go. In other cases, it simply brings the reminder that attraction grows stronger when admiration is present. Respect matters. Curiosity matters. Shared values matter. For anyone already involved, this can be a good time to bring fresh air into the relationship through shared plans, learning something together, traveling, discussing the future, or getting out of a stale emotional routine. Sometimes relationships do not need a crisis talk. Sometimes they need a new horizon, a different topic, a trip, a reason to imagine life beyond the current to-do list. That can change a lot. Work-wise, this transit can support anything connected to publishing, higher education, coaching, law, international work, travel industries, spiritual work, social media, teaching, broadcasting, or thought leadership. If your work depends on ideas reaching beyond your immediate environment, Venus in Gemini can help widen that reach. The message may travel further. A platform may open. A collaboration might cross borders. A concept could find the right audience once it is put into words more clearly. And even if none of that is literally your field, the broader lesson still applies. Stop thinking too small. That may be one of the biggest corrections this transit offers. Libra Rising can sometimes spend too long weighing every variable, trying to preserve balance, trying not to make the wrong move, trying to keep all options pleasant and all relationships intact. Venus in Gemini does not exactly remove indecision, but it does speed up the mind and make it easier to test an idea rather than sitting on it forever. It reminds you that not every step has to be permanent in order to be worthwhile. Try it. Explore it. Ask the question. Send the application. Book the trip. Study the thing. Follow the curiosity. That is how this energy likes to work. Now, there is a shadow side, and it should be taken seriously. Gemini can scatter attention when everything looks interesting at once. In the ninth house, that can become too many ideas, too many beliefs, too many directions, too many possibilities, too many plans with no real commitment behind them. One day you are convinced of one path. The next day something else seems more appealing. Inspiration is high, but follow-through can become inconsistent if there is no anchor. So the answer is not to shut down the expansion. It is to give it shape. Not every insight needs to become a lifestyle. Not every attractive philosophy needs to be adopted wholesale. Not every exciting person is meant to change your whole life. To some, it matters here too. There can also be a tendency to romanticize distance under this transit. A place far away may seem magical simply because it is not here. A person from a different background may seem profound simply because they represent change. A new belief system may look like freedom simply because the old one feels stale. Some of that is real. Some of it is projection. Knowing the difference will save a lot of unnecessary confusion. That is especially important in love. The spark may be genuine. The story around it may still need checking. The strongest use of this transit is not endless wandering. It is expansion with intelligence. Let life get bigger, yes. Let the mind travel, yes. Let curiosity lead, yes. But stay honest about what actually has substance once the initial excitement settles. At its best, Venus in Gemini reminds Libra Rising that beauty is not only in harmony. It is also in discovery, in learning, in movement, in the freedom to update your thinking, change your mind, and follow a path that feels alive instead of merely appropriate. This can be a wonderful stretch for opening the world back up. Say yes to the trip that makes sense. Read the book that changes the frame. Have the conversation that broadens the view. Let someone surprise you with a perspective you had not considered. Give yourself permission to want more from life than what is merely convenient. That is where the sweetness lives. For Libra Rising, Venus in Gemini works best when you stay curious without becoming scattered, open without becoming naive, and willing to let life expand beyond the old script. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Scorpio Rising. Venus entering Gemini takes things deeper for Scorpio Rising, but not in a loud or obvious way. The focus shifts toward intimacy, trust, shared resources, private dynamics, emotional entanglements, and all the parts of life that get more complicated once real investment is involved. Gemini rules the 8th house here, so this is not casual territory. It deals with what is owed, what is exchanged, what is hidden, what is binding, and what happens when something moves past surface level and starts asking for honesty. So the tone changes. Conversations may become more revealing. Attraction may get stronger, but also more layered. Money can become tied up with another person's choices. A connection may feel lighter on the outside, while quietly pulling much more at the center. That is the landscape. For Scorpio Rising, Venus in Gemini can bring movement around shared finances, debts, taxes, loans, investments, support from others, business partnerships, inheritance matters, or any arrangement where resources are linked. Sometimes help appears. Sometimes the real story is about sorting out what is fair, what is draining, and what needs better boundaries. Either way, the numbers usually tell an emotional story too. And that is part of what makes this placement so interesting. The eighth house is never only practical. It has everything to do with trust. Who gets access? Who has influence? Where dependence begins? Where attachment becomes real? Venus moving through Gemini can stir all of that, but in a more mental and conversational way than people expect. The issue may not arrive through one dramatic event. It may come through a question, a realization, a revealing exchange, a detail that changes the interpretation, or a pattern that finally becomes impossible to ignore. That can be useful. Scorpio rising usually senses more than other people realize. Motives get picked up quickly. Shifts in tone do not go unnoticed. But Venus in Gemini asks for something slightly different. Not just instinct. Language, dialogue, clarification. Instead of staying with the feeling alone, this transit wants things named. What are the terms? What is actually being offered? What is assumed? What is shared? What is private? What is owed? Those questions matter now. Romantically, the atmosphere can become magnetic very quickly. The eighth house tends to intensify whatever it touches, and Venus adds attraction, chemistry, and desire. Gemini gives it a sharper, more curious edge. So interest may build through conversation that becomes revealing fast, mental intrigue, taboo subjects, private humor, emotional intelligence, or the feeling that someone knows exactly how to hold your attention. That can be incredibly seductive, not because it is loud, because it gets under the skin. For anyone dating, this can bring encounters that feel psychologically charged. A person may stand out because they are clever, observant, hard to read, or able to keep up with you in ways that feel rare. Surface level charm may not be enough now. There has to be substance underneath it. A quick mind helps. So does honesty. So does the ability to stay present when the conversation moves into more uncomfortable territory. For established relationships, money and intimacy can become intertwined in important ways during this period. Shared expenses, emotional reciprocity, trust, loyalty, privacy, and the question of who is carrying what may all come up. In some cases, this leads to greater closeness because the right conversation clears the air. In others, it exposes where there has been avoidance, vagueness, or too much imbalance to keep pretending everything is fine. That is not a bad thing. The eighth house is where truth gets stronger than appearances. Sometimes relief begins there. This can also be a deeply revealing stretch for emotional patterns. Old attachments may resurface. A fear around vulnerability may become easier to spot. A dynamic that once felt exciting may start showing its cost more clearly. Venus in Gemini has a way of making hidden complexity more visible through contrast. Something may look charming until the inconsistency appears. A connection may sound promising until the follow-through disappears. Mixed signals are especially worth watching now. Because here is the shadow side. Gemini can split attention. In the eighth house, that can show up as unclear motives, uneven effort, half-truths, emotional evasiveness, or too much talking around the issue instead of speaking directly. It can also create fascination with people who are stimulating, but unstable. The chemistry may be real. The reliability may be missing. So, the lesson is not to become suspicious of everything. It is to stop ignoring what does not add up. Financially, this can be a good period for reviewing shared accounts, agreements, contracts, debts, subscriptions, tax issues, payout structures, commissions, support arrangements, or any area where money moves through another person or another system. There may be more than one option on the table. A useful conversation could lead to a better arrangement. Information that was missing may finally come in. If something has felt foggy, now is the time to ask sharper questions. Do not assume. Confirm. That advice applies emotionally too. The strongest version of Venus in Gemini here is not mind reading. It is clean communication about messy subjects. Who wants what? Who means what? Who is actually available for depth and who only enjoys the thrill of intensity without the responsibility that comes with it. Scorpio rising does not benefit from vague energy in this part of the chart. The more direct the exchange, the better. There is a healing side to all of this as well. The 8th house is tied to transformation, and Venus can soften the process. A hard conversation may go better than expected. A burden may become shareable. Shame may begin to loosen once something is spoken aloud. A relationship can deepen when honesty replaces performance. Even grief or loss can move differently when the mind has words for what the heart has been carrying in silence. That is one of the quieter gifts here. Pleasure may also become more private during this cycle. Less interest in performative social energy. More interest in what feels real, confidential, and emotionally alive. Superficial attention is less satisfying under this influence. What lands is wit with depth, lightness with intelligence, and attraction with enough steadiness behind it to feel safe. That combination matters. Scorpio rising does not need noise. It needs substance. And during Venus in Gemini, substance may show up through conversation more than through grand gestures. So while Venus moves through Gemini, pay attention to what gets revealed once things move beyond the surface. Read the fine print. Ask the second question. Notice where trust grows and where it hesitates. Let intimacy become clearer, not murkier. Let financial arrangements become smarter, not looser. Let desire teach you something about what you are actually ready to share and what still needs a boundary. For Scorpio rising, this is a period for better terms, deeper honesty, stronger discernment, and more intelligent intimacy. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Sagittarius Rising. Venus entering Gemini puts relationships front and center. For Sagittarius Rising, this is not necessarily dramatic, but it is noticeable. Life starts speaking through other people. A conversation lands differently. A connection becomes sweeter. Someone reflects something back. That is hard to ignore. That makes sense because Gemini rules the 7th house here. So while Venus moves through this sign, the focus turns toward dating, partnership, clients, agreements, collaboration, and one-on-one dynamics. In other words, the exchange matters. Messages may carry more weight. Chemistry becomes easier to notice. People arrive with better timing. What happens between you? And someone else starts shaping the story more than usual. For Sagittarius Rising, that can be refreshing. There is often a natural instinct to keep moving, keep growing, keep aiming toward what feels bigger. But Venus in the 7th asks for something slightly different. It asks for attention. It asks for reciprocity. It asks what happens when another person is not just part of the scene, but part of the lesson. That is where this transit works. Romantically, this can be one of the more active periods of the cycle. Flirting may increase. Conversations can get livelier. Attraction may build quickly. People seem more responsive, more curious, more available. Gemini brings wit, banter, mental spark, and fast moving. Social energy, so chemistry often starts through conversation. A person may stand out because they are funny, sharp, playful, or simply very easy to talk to. That tends to matter here. Boredom is usually a problem. A good mental rhythm is not. For anyone dating, this can bring more openings through apps, introductions, everyday life, shared circles, travel, or chance. Encounters that develop naturally. Something light can still matter. What begins casually may not stay casual for long. For those already involved, this transit can help restore movement inside the relationship. More conversation, more humor, more room to enjoy each other, less getting stuck in routine. Sometimes that is all a bond needs. Not a dramatic fix, just fresh air. This can also be helpful in business partnerships, client work, and any one-on-one collaboration. A meeting may go well. An agreement may become easier. Someone may bring a useful offer. A tense dynamic can soften if the real issue has been communication. That is one of the strengths here. Gemini brings options. Venus improves the tone. Together, they can make it easier to negotiate, connect, and find better rhythm with another person. But there is a shadow side. Gemini can be charming, witty, socially fluent, and exciting without always being consistent. So under this transit, mixed signals are possible. A person may say all the right things and still avoid real clarity. A connection may feel alive, but not stable. An agreement may sound good until the details are examined properly. So discernment matters. Not every interesting person is relationship material. Not every easy conversation has depth behind it. Not every offer improves your life just because it arrives wrapped in charm. That applies in love and in work. For Sagittarius Rising, there can sometimes be a tendency to move fast when the energy feels good. Venus in Gemini understands that, but it also asks for better judgment. Attraction is not alignment. Chemistry is not commitment. Fun is not the same thing as direction. Once that becomes clear, this transit gets much easier to work with because at its best, Venus in the seventh brings the right people closer. It helps with timing. It improves connection. It softens friction. It shows where mutuality exists. And that matters. The right relationship should not make life smaller. It should make it better. That realization may come through dating, through business, through one important conversation, or through recognizing who actually knows how to meet you halfway. There is also something attractive about you during this period, but it comes less from force and more from responsiveness. Being open helps. Being present helps. Being genuinely engaged helps. People notice when the exchange feels easy. They remember when they feel seen. So while Venus moves through Gemini, pay attention to who brings clarity, who brings confusion, and who makes life feel lighter without making it messier. For Sagittarius Rising, this is a period for better connection, smarter partnership, and more enjoyable chemistry. The best way to work with it is simple. Stay open, stay sharp, and notice who is truly meeting you where you are. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Capricorn Rising. Venus entering Gemini shifts attention toward the part of life that deals with work, routine, health, scheduling, daily habits, and the small systems that hold everything together. For Capricorn Rising, Gemini rules the sixth house. So this transit is less about grand declarations and more about what happens every day. The pace changes. The calendar gets busier. Conversations around work pick up. A different rhythm starts forming. And because Venus is involved, the goal is not simply to do more. It is to make life run better. That can be more important than it sounds. The sixth house is where reality shows up in practical form. It is the inbox, the meetings, the errands, the deadlines, the body, the stress load, the habits that help, and the habits that quietly make everything harder. So when Venus moves through Gemini here, one of the first things that often happens is increased awareness of what is working and what is not. A routine may need updating. A workload may need rebalancing. A better system may become obvious. A conversation with a coworker may smooth something out. A small adjustment may improve the whole week. That is how this transit tends to operate. Not always dramatically, but usefully. For Capricorn Rising, there is usually a strong instinct to keep going no matter what. Push through. Handle it. Stay responsible. Finish the job. That can accomplish a lot. But Venus in the sixth house asks a different question. Is the way you are doing it still sustainable? That matters now. Gemini brings motion, variety, and mental stimulation, so this period can get busy fast. More communication, more tasks, more moving parts, more need to switch gears quickly. If the work involves writing, sales, teaching, marketing, coordination, short-term projects, client communication, media, or anything that depends on multitasking and responsiveness, this can actually be a helpful stretch. The mind stays active. The tone improves. People may be easier to work with. A better rhythm can be found. That is one of the strengths here. Relationships in the work environment may soften. Coworkers can become easier to deal with. A professional exchange may become friendlier. Someone helpful may appear. A solution could come through conversation instead of force. Venus tends to bring more grace to the environment, and in the sixth house that often shows up through improved cooperation. Still, Gemini does have a shadow side. Too many tabs open. Too many small obligations. Too much reacting. Too much noise in the daily schedule. That is where this transit can become draining if there is no filter. Capricorn Rising does not always notice burnout immediately, because endurance is often stronger than self-permission to slow down. But Venus in Gemini can reveal where the mind is overstimulated and the body is quietly paying for it. So this is a good time to pay attention to what daily life feels like from the inside. Is the schedule supporting you, or just using you? Is the routine helping, or simply keeping you busy? Are the habits restoring energy, or scattering it? Those questions are worth asking. Health can become a bigger focus under this transit too, especially in ways connected to the nervous system, sleep, mental load, digestion, movement, and the effect stress has on the body. Nothing here says crisis on its own, but it does say that little things matter. Eating better matters. Resting properly matters. Walking matters. A calmer morning matters. Cutting down on unnecessary mental clutter matters. The answer may not be dramatic. It may be practical. Romantically, this is not the most theatrical Venus transit, but it can still bring something meaningful. Attraction may grow through everyday contact, shared routines, work settings, repeated interaction, practical support, or simply noticing who consistently makes life easier rather than more complicated. That matters more than usual now. Someone may become attractive because they are thoughtful, because they remember details, because they help without turning it into a performance, because the energy feels easy in real life, not just exciting in theory. That is very sixth house. For those already involved, this transit can improve a relationship through daily behavior more than big emotional speeches. Better coordination, kinder communication, more help with responsibilities, more attention to how life is being managed together. If tension has been building, it may not be because love is missing. It may be because the practical side of life has become messy, tiring, or unfair. This transit can help fix some of that, one useful conversation at a time. There is also something quietly attractive about getting your life in better order during this period. Venus in the sixth can bring satisfaction through competence, refinement, and cleaner systems, a better workspace, a more functional schedule, a habit that improves mood, a work process that saves time. These things may sound unglamorous, but they can change the emotional atmosphere more than expected. That is the larger lesson here. Pleasure is not only found in escape. Sometimes it is found in making life easier to live. Capricorn Rising can benefit a lot from that reminder. You do not always need a dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes the real shift comes from reducing friction, fewer unnecessary tasks, better boundaries, smarter pacing, less chaos in the routine, more support where support is actually needed. Of course, there is a caution around perfectionism too. When Gemini gets busy in the sixth house, it can turn into tweaking everything, overthinking every detail, trying too many methods at once, or constantly rearranging the system instead of simply using it. So the goal is not the perfect routine. The goal is a workable one. Good enough is powerful here. A few smart improvements will do more than a complete overhaul that lasts 3 days and then collapses. So while Venus moves through Gemini, make the schedule kinder. Improve the workflow. Have the conversation that clears the air. Notice which habits are making the body feel better and which ones are stealing energy without permission. Let practical life become more flexible, more efficient, and a little lighter. For Capricorn Rising, this is a period for better systems, improved cooperation, more intelligent pacing, and the kind of daily refinement that makes everything else work better too. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Aquarius Rising. Venus entering Gemini is usually one of the more enjoyable shifts for Aquarius Rising. because it lands in the fifth house, the part of life connected to romance, pleasure, creativity, fun, attention, self-expression, dating, children, passion projects, and the things that make the heart feel awake again. So this transit tends to bring some sparkle back. The mood gets lighter. Interest returns. Attraction becomes easier to feel. The creative side starts moving again. Life asks for more play, not just more productivity. That matters, especially if everything has been feeling too serious, too repetitive, or too focused on obligations. Venus in Gemini does not want to drag you deeper into heaviness. It wants to bring movement, laughter, flirtation, curiosity, and a little more life into the parts of your world that should not feel like work all the time. For Aquarius Rising, that can be a real reset. The fifth house is not about survival. It is about aliveness. It rules what lights you up, what draws you in, what makes you feel chosen, wanted, inspired, or creatively engaged. So when Venus moves through this area, one of the first things that often changes is simple. Enjoyment starts mattering more. Not in a reckless way. More in a why has everything felt so dry kind of way. And Gemini adds a very particular flavor to that. This is not heavy, sweeping, all-consuming Venus. This is quicker, livelier, more social, more curious, more playful, more mentally stimulating. So pleasure may show up through conversation, humor, messaging, banter, spontaneity, short trips, social plans, clever people, new ideas, and the kind of chemistry that starts in the mind before it reaches anywhere else. For Aquarius Rising, that usually works well. A strong mental current is often half the attraction. If dating is active, this can bring more openings, more texts, more interest, more flirtation, more opportunities to meet people through friends, social media, events, hobbies, creative spaces, or just being out in the world a bit more. A person may stand out because they are witty, fast, unusual, bright, and impossible to reduce to one flat category. There is often something very conversational about the attraction here. The spark builds through the exchange itself, the jokes, the timing, the back and forth, that feeling of wanting to keep talking because the energy is actually awake. That is a big part of the magic. And for those already involved with someone, this transit can help restore play where things have become too functional. It can bring back flirting inside the relationship. More teasing, more laughter, more fun, more reasons to leave the house or try something different. The bond may not need a dramatic emotional excavation. It may simply need a little oxygen. That is one of the gifts of the fifth house. It reminds you that connection is not only built through loyalty and endurance, it is also built through delight. Venus in Gemini can help bring that back. There is another side to this transit that goes beyond love, and that is creativity. This can be a very good period for writing, performing, designing, posting, teaching, making content, brainstorming, pitching ideas, or doing anything that depends on voice, originality, style, and quick thinking. Gemini helps thoughts move. Venus helps them land attractively. So if there is something that wants to be expressed, this is a better time to let it out instead of sitting on it until it becomes too polished to feel alive. That is especially important for Aquarius Rising, because sometimes the vision gets so big or so conceptual that it stops feeling playful. Venus in the fifth fixes that by putting heart back into the process, the work may become more enjoyable. The tone may become more inviting. What you make may simply feel more human, more spontaneous, more fun to share. That can go a long way. This is also a supportive stretch for visibility, though not in the career sense as much as in the personal sense. People may respond more warmly. Charm is easier to access. The social signal becomes brighter. What makes you interesting becomes easier for other people to notice, not because you are trying harder, but because the energy is more open, and that makes you easier to enjoy. Children, fertility, or themes around parenting can also become more active under a fifth house Venus transit, depending on your life circumstances. For some, this simply brings more focus to kids, more sweetness in those dynamics, or more attention to what a younger, freer part of yourself needs. For others, it can be about what you are creating and nurturing, not only biologically, but artistically, emotionally, personally. Because the fifth house is also the house of creation. What is being made? What wants to be expressed? What wants more room? Those questions can become louder now. Of course, Gemini has a shadow side, and here it can show up as distraction. Too many crushes, too many chats, too many little flirtations that never become anything steady. Too many creative ideas started at once. Too many invitations accepted because they sound fun in the moment. Then the schedule becomes chaotic and the energy gets thin. That is something to watch. The point of this transit is not to become scattered in 10 directions. It is to reconnect with joy in a way that still leaves you grounded enough to enjoy it. Otherwise, the sweetness turns into overstimulation, and what should feel exciting starts feeling noisy. So there is a balancing act here. Follow what feels alive, but not every spark needs a whole storyline. Try the idea, but not every idea needs to become a project. Enjoy the attention, but not every admirer deserves access. That kind of discernment matters, especially because the fifth house can make everything feel more personal. A compliment lands harder. A flirtation feels brighter. A creative response means more. That is lovely. But it also means you will want to pay attention to what has substance and what only has novelty. The difference becomes important in love. Someone may be fascinating but unreliable. Someone may be fun but inconsistent. A connection may feel electric for a week and then vanish the second things require depth or steadiness. That does not make the experience meaningless. It just means not every spark is meant to become a future. Aquarius Rising often values freedom, intelligence, and space inside relationships. So Venus in Gemini can feel very appealing. There is room to breathe here. Room to talk. Room to move. Room to stay interested. But if the connection is going to matter, there still has to be some continuity underneath the excitement. Otherwise, it remains a great conversation and nothing more. That is worth remembering. At its best, though, this transit is a gift. It can bring back desire. It can bring back creative momentum. It can bring back a sense that life is not only about holding everything together. A good laugh can change the whole day. A promising conversation can wake something up. A new attraction can remind you that the heart is still very much online. A creative idea can pull you back toward yourself. That is the real beauty here. So, while Venus moves through Gemini, give yourself permission to enjoy more. Make space for dating if dating is relevant. Let flirting be fun without making it heavier than it needs to be. Follow the creative idea that keeps returning. Say yes to the plan that breaks up the routine in a good way. Spend time with people who make you feel more alert, more alive, more inspired. For Aquarius Rising, this is a period for romance, charm, better creative flow, and a renewed relationship with pleasure. The best way to use it is simple. Stay playful, stay selective, and let joy have a real place in the story again. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading. Pisces Rising. Venus entering Gemini brings attention back to home, inner life, family dynamics, living situation, and the emotional foundation everything else is built on. For Pisces Rising, Gemini rules the fourth house, so the tone becomes more private. Less interest in chasing everything outside. More interest in what feels good behind closed doors. The need for comfort gets louder. So does the need for peace. And once Venus starts moving through this part of the chart, it becomes much harder to ignore what is soothing and what is quietly draining the life out of you. That matters because the fourth house is not only about the physical home. It is also about the atmosphere inside it, the emotional climate, the past, family patterns, what the nervous system does when no one is watching, the place you return to after dealing with the world. So when Venus moves through Gemini here, there is often a real desire to make that inner space lighter, calmer, prettier, easier, and more breathable. Sometimes that shows up very literally. A need to clean up the space, rearrange a room, buy something for the home, spend more time inside, work from home more often, stay closer to familiar people. Make life feel softer at the edges. Sometimes it is less visible than that and more emotional. A memory returns. A family conversation becomes more important. A pattern from the past starts making more sense. The heart begins wanting safety in a different form. That is where a lot of the story lives. For Pisces Rising, life can pull energy outward pretty easily. Work, relationships, other people's feelings, the general noise of the world. It all gets picked up. Venus in Gemini offers a chance to come back to center, but not in a heavy or isolated way. Gemini keeps things moving, so the healing here is not silence forever and disappearing from life. It is more like fresh air entering a room that has been emotionally stuffy. A conversation may help. A different perspective may help. A small change at home may improve the whole mood. A little more lightness in family dynamics may do more than expected. That is the gift here. If home has felt tense, chaotic, stale, or emotionally overloaded, this is a good period for resetting the environment. Better boundaries, better communication, better pacing, less unspoken pressure, less carrying everyone at once. The fourth house always asks what is happening underneath the visible storyline, and Venus here can make that question easier to answer honestly. What feels peaceful? What feels crowded? Who feels safe? What leaves you depleted? What part of the past is still living rent-free in the present? Those questions are useful now. Family matters may also move during this time. There could be more conversations with relatives, more contact with people from the past, more focus on parents, roots, or where you come from. For some, this may bring sweetness and reconnection. For others, it highlights just how much certain dynamics still shape the present. Either way, more awareness is likely, and awareness helps, because Pisces rising can sometimes keep adapting to emotional conditions that should have been questioned a long time ago. You get used to the mood. You get used to the role. You get used to being the one who absorbs, smooths over, understands, forgives, and keeps the emotional current moving. Venus in Gemini in the fourth can interrupt that pattern just enough to ask whether the home base is actually supporting you. Not whether it looks fine, whether it feels good. That is a more important question. Romantically, the focus may shift away from flashy chemistry and toward emotional comfort. Who feels easy to be around? Who calms the system? Who feels familiar in a good way? Who can talk about real things without turning every feeling into a crisis? Attraction may grow through domestic closeness, private conversation, shared vulnerability, or simply the sense that someone feels like a place you can put your guard down. That can be very beautiful. For anyone dating, there may be less appetite for performative connection and more interest in what feels sincere. A person may stand out because they are thoughtful, grounded, curious, and emotionally easy to talk to. Not shallow, not smothering, just safe enough for the heart to soften. For those already involved, home and relationship themes can become more connected now. Living arrangements, family involvement, emotional habits, shared space, or the day-to-day atmosphere between you may become more important than usual. Sometimes the issue is not the relationship itself. It is the environment around it. Too much noise, too little rest, too many unspoken expectations. Venus in Gemini can help open that conversation in a way that is lighter and more workable. That can change a lot. There is another side to this placement that has to do with memory. Old feelings may resurface. A former home may come to mind. A chapter you thought was fully over may ask for one more look. Someone from the past may reappear, literally or emotionally. That does not always mean something is meant to restart. Sometimes it simply means there is one last piece to understand. Gemini tends to bring things back through thought, dialogue, or unexpected contact, and in the fourth house that can stir the emotional archive pretty quickly. So if something old rises, do not rush to name it destiny. See what it is actually showing you. That said, there is a shadow side here too. Gemini can make the emotional atmosphere a little restless. Too much thinking, too much replaying, too many inner conversations, too much mental noise inside what should be a restful space. Home can become cluttered not only physically, but psychologically. So if the mind starts running in circles, the answer may not be more analysis. It may be simplicity. Open a window. Put the phone down. Clear the room. Take the walk. Say the thing directly. Stop carrying 10 emotional tabs at once. That is part of working well with this energy. This can also be a nice period for decorating, hosting small gatherings, reconnecting with trusted people, researching a move, improving family communication, or making a space feel more like you. Nothing here says everything must be dramatic. In fact, the more ordinary the adjustment, the more effective it may be. A better chair, a calmer room, a clearer boundary, a more honest conversation, a habit that lets the body actually relax once the day is over. Those little changes matter more than they seem. And on a deeper level, Venus in the fourth can be healing because it reminds Pisces rising that softness is not a luxury. It is necessary. Beauty in the private world matters. Emotional ease matters. Feeling safe in your own space matters. Life becomes much harder when the foundation is neglected. So while Venus moves through Gemini, pay attention to what makes home feel lighter and what makes it feel harder to inhabit. Listen to what the body does in certain rooms, around certain people, and inside certain memories. Let comfort become intelligent. Let the past tell the truth without running the future. Let peace become something you participate in creating. For Pisces Rising, this is a period for better boundaries at home, sweeter family dynamics, more emotional clarity, and the kind of inner reorganization that quietly improves everything else. The best way to work with it is simple. Make the space kinder, make the conversations clearer, and stop calling chaos familiar just because it has been there a long time. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and book a consultation for a more personal reading.